Hey, Rob Tapper here, University of Montana. Welcome to our Trombone Masterclass. I'm excited to talk to you and work with you today. Hope the information is helpful. At any time, feel free to email me with any questions you have about trombone or music. Love to chat more with you. So we're going to break this session into 5 different parts. First part is just going to be general information about music. Second one is we're going to talk about playing considerations, especially having to deal with the trombone. We're also going to chat about trombonisms, things that the trombone does and you can do to make your section sound better and your playing sound better when you're by yourself. We're also going to dig into making sounds fun. And that has to do with scales, of course. So here we go. We all want to be good. So a wise man once said, mediocrity sucks. So whatever you do, just decide you're going to do it and you're going to do it really well. You're into music, you're in band, you're in jazz band, so you already have an artistic mind and you already know what it's like to utilize that. So always strive for being the best. We always want to make sure that we're listening to the music that we're playing. If we really like rock and roll, if we really like any other kind of music, we want to spend some time listening to it. Discover, be curious about that music. And while you're doing that, you want to make sure that you're checking out the players of your instrument and finding your heroes. Even players that are not your instrument. But find your heroes. I play a lot of classical trombone. I play a lot of jazz trombone. I play some funk. I have players that I like to listen to that when I'm playing those instruments and I'm playing those styles of music, I want to try to sound like. And lastly, we want to make sure that we get next to the great players and teachers in this world. So if there's a great player or teacher somewhere near you, reach out to them. Don't be shy. Reach out to them and spend some time with them. Find out what they do and how they do it so that you can be great at what you do. Next, we're going to talk about how it's never too early to be a professional and what that means, no matter what age you are. First thing is to be on time. On time doesn't mean sitting down when the bell rings or when the conductor gets on the podium or the director's in front of the band. On time usually means being 5 to 10 minutes early. Making sure you have everything you need. Mutes, pencils. See that video called What's in My Case. That'll give you a better idea about what I'm talking about. Now, being early when you're in school is a little tricky because you don't have that much time between passing periods. But I would say, y'all like band, y'all like jazz band. Hustle. Get there. Get there as early as you can. Be ready to go. Next thing is be nice and friendly all the time. No matter who you talk to in the world of professional music or any other field, they talk about wanting to work with people that are friendly and nice. And don't be judgmental. We all have that tendency. Because of our egos, we all somehow want to prove that we know what we're talking about. You know what you're talking about. Feel good about it. You don't have to let everybody know what you're thinking. So try not to be judgmental. When you're playing in a group, no matter what the group is, my job is to make everyone around me sound and feel better. So take that however you want to take that and do your homework, do your listening, write the stuff in your parts, make sure that you're playing things really, really well so everybody around you sounds better. Now, walk the walk. That's a big one. Be on time, be early, do all the things we're just talking about. You don't need to let everybody know you're doing them. You just do them. Feel good about it. Know that you're doing good things and you're putting out that kind of positive energy, not only in your jazz band, in your sections, but in your schools, but out there in the world. It's really great. And lastly, pencils. I'm a stickler. Anyone that has worked with me before knows this. Write down what you need to write down in your parts. Here's the key, so you don't make the same mistake twice. You want to make sure that you're playing something. Everybody makes mistakes. You're allowed to make mistakes. Go ahead. If you're not making a mistake, you're not trying. It's never too early to be a professional. Our second part of the masterclass is going to be jazz is a legato style and how to work on that. The considerations of the trombone playing legato is very tricky, so you have to spend a lot of time on it. The best book in the world for that is our Rochu Melodies Etudes in our classical world. So hopefully you're taking some lessons and working on those. That's the same exact tongue, that legato tongue that we use in jazz. Trumpet players all around the planet use Arbin's and Clark studies. We're going to do one of those right now for you. And if you take that and work on it in every key, and then you can also work on it in different sounds, major, minor, it's going to help you a lot. But the first thing we do is we always work with the truth. I'm going to put this truth on 84, but instead of that being 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm going to utilize that as my hi-hat. So it's going to be on 2 and 4, which is a little tricky to get used to, but really valuable when you're playing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. So you can tell right away there's way more of a swing emphasis than if I play that straight. Also, it gives me the opportunity to really hone in on that legato, that jazz's legato style. So take that, that's the key of F. That falls really nicely on the trombone. Don't be afraid of what you're afraid of. Get uncomfortable and get familiar with the unfamiliar. So now I'm going to do the same thing, up a half step in G flat. 1, 2. Work on making that sound and feel as good as your easiest keys, the ones that you're familiar with. So that's how to use that Arbin study and flow with your major scales. And you can do the same thing with minor scales as well. So now we'll go back to F. I'm going to do the same thing in F minor. And there's all kinds of different kinds of minor. We're not going to worry about that right now. We're just going to think about F minor. Well, so for you out there taking notes, that can either be your Dorian minor or that can be your natural minor. Those are using the same 7th on that minor sound. So that's how to use the Arbin study, or even just some simple, quote, scale study, unquote, to make yourself feel better about what you're doing and get flow around the horn, and also work on time and feel at the same time. Next up, we're going to have some fun with sounds. We're always told to practice our scales, so we need to make it fun, because it ends up being work, it ends up being a job. So here's some fun ways to deal with sounds, scales, and also at the same time work on our feel, work on our time, and our style, and get to know the sounds a lot better so we can be more familiar with them when we're improvising and in any situation. So we're then to take our C major sound. In black, we're going to go up the scale. When you get back to the C, 1 octave up, that's number 8, and the next note up is the 9th. So I always like to play all my 1 octave sounds to the 9th and back down again, the 9th being the blue. So, got my truth, C major, When I get back down to the bottom, I want to arpeggiate or verticalize that sound. 2 ways to do it. In concert band, often we will do the 1, 3, 5, 8, the octave at the top in black. In jazz, we're oftentimes using some of those other notes. So we're going to use the 7th, the B natural, and we're also going to use the D as the 9th. And that's in blue. A little different sound. So we go up the scale, down the scale, then we arpeggiate using the blue, using the 7th and the 9th. Another great way we can get to know a sound is by referring back to the Arbins and those Clark studies. So take that sound and really get into it. Go up and down those, make that feel really good, right? You want to make sure you're playing them. There is no fast and slow when you're working on things. There is groove and no groove. So no matter what you're working on, make sure you got a groove to it. So after we've done our Arbin sound, we've done our scale up and down, we've done our 7th, ninth arpeggiation. We do the arbans. We get that feeling really good. Everything's legato. Then we move on to thirds. This one you do in concert band all the time. So in green, we do the thirds ascending. Right, done that. And now what goes up must come down. So we're going to do our thirds descending. So we're going to start on the third first. Third first, first, third, third first. And we're going to go up the scale, up the sound, but doing thirds descending. That's a little different sound, and it's a little less familiar, but well worth it. And here's why. Now, we're going to alternate the two. So we're going to go up a set of thirds, then down a set of thirds, then up a set of thirds, then down a set of thirds. And hopefully you can hear and feel that's just one sound. That's just C major. There's C minor, there's C Dorian minor, there's C melodic minor, there's C harmonic minor, there's Mixolydian modes, Lydian modes. You can see how far you can get with the depth of this. All right, so now we're going to tackle triads. We've done thirds, all kinds of different permutations. Now we're going to do the same thing with triads. The famous triad. So, So those are done very well in time, but they weren't legato. I don't know if you caught that or not. And that's fine to work on that. Just as long as you're aware that you're not working on legato, you are actually working on a different kind of articulation. So we'll go through that, the same articulation. Okay, now what goes up must come down. So we want to do those same triads coming down. So instead of 1, 3, 5, now we're 5, 3, 1. Same articulation. 2, 3. Now, of course, what we did with the thirds, we're going to do with the triads. We're going to alternate them now. So we're going to go up the one, come down the second triad, up the third, and so forth. We're going to alternate them. Going back to our legato style. And then we want to do the same thing in reverse. Now, we're going to dig into some really cool stuff with our sounds. Half-step approach. Just taking a half step below or above a note, this becomes the process of encircling notes. It's heard in great players all over the place. So we're going to, before we play the first note, we're going to take a note that's a half step below that of the triad. So the first triad, C, E, G, we're going to play a B before we get to that triad. Second triad, D, F, A, we're going to play a half step below D, a C sharp. So we're going to do all of our triads ascending with the half step approach in red. That sounds pretty cool. Now we're going to do our descending triads with a half step approach in blue. And here's our final step. Now we're going to alternate. So we're going to go up the one chord with our half step approach, down the two chord with our half step approach. So we're going to mix and match between the two colors. Here we go. uh, uh, uh. And again, think about if you put the time and effort into doing that, and even just a couple of major keys, and then ultimately all your major keys. And then you put it into different sounds, different minor sounds. Because we know that when you're working on things, everything's not all going to be the same sound. So, trombonisms. Now we're going to talk about using alternate positions to sound and feel better. Two really big alternate positions that we use when we play trombone, especially when we're playing lead trombone, is the D in fourth position and the F in fourth position. These are both above the staff. So, in that lick that we have, common, the D to D, C, D, that sounds okay. But if we take that second D in fourth position, we can use a natural slur, and we don't have to do any work on it. And we can also put a turn in there. Same thing with F in fourth, same lick, harmonic above it, F, E flat, F. Coming into first position for that second F. Sounds okay, but if we take the second F in fourth, we can really get some bite on that. And also falls. It's always a really curious thing, falls. I really recommend you working on falls two different ways. The natural reaction for a trombone player is to do a fall outward, That's natural, 2, 3. We do that all the time. I challenge you and invite you to try to figure out how to do a fall coming inward. So instead of we come in, it's a whole different sound. And sometimes when you're playing trombone, you're falling with the trumpets and or the saxophones. So sometimes it sounds cleaner if you try to come inward and catch those partials the same way a saxophone and especially trumpets will do. So now we're going to do what I call steps to learning a tune. The jazz language can be so ambiguous. It can be tricky sometimes figuring out how to get from A to B to C to D. What we're going to do right now is outline those steps, hopefully make it a little easy for you so you get a chance to work on tunes and have some fun playing with people. So we're going to work on the first 4 bars of the standard Autumn Leaves. By going through these steps, hopefully you'll get a better understanding and gain more confidence. So the first thing when we're learning a tune is the melody. If you're going to learn the melody of a tune, you have to listen to different recordings of it. You can't just learn a melody from a real book or a lead sheet you have. So, first 4 bars of Autumn Leaves. Always hanging with the truth. 1, 2. So there's the first 8 bars. We're only going to tackle the first 4 bars. So after we've listened to the melody, after we've played the melody, we record ourselves to make sure we sound good, make sure we're swinging, make sure it feels good. Because sometimes what we think we're doing isn't true to what's being heard on the other side of the bell. So record yourself playing all these steps as often as you can. All right, so we've got the melody, we've listened to it, we've played through it, we made it feel really good. Now we got to get into the harmony. So first thing we do is we're going to take the roots of the chords and we're just going to play through them, first in whole notes, just to get how much time lasts for every chord, the harmonic rhythm. 2, 1, 2, 3. Not the fanciest thing in the world, but necessary. Next, let's treat it like a bass line a little bit. How would a bass play it? A bass would play it in quarter notes. 1, So that starts to feel just a little bit better. Next thing we're going to do, after we've got that, is if we can record ourselves playing that bass line, and then play that in some headphones or on your speakers while you're playing the melody. Make sure it all lines up. Next step, after we've done the roots in our bass line, now we're going to start playing the triads. So we have to start to verticalize these chords. So we're going to play the triads. 1, 3, 5. Sounds simple again, but so necessary. What goes up must come down. So we got to play those triads coming down now, descending. And you can start to hear how those sounds are built up. Next thing we want to do, after we've gone through our bass line, we've gone through our triads up and down, is we want to start arpeggiating and verticalizing even just a little step further. So we want to get to the sevenths now. We want to add those sevenths. It's a great deal of information to understand how these chords are built. Major 7 chords, dominant 7 chords, and minor 7 chords. So that's another whole bit of business we've got to make sure that we have in our fingers, in our ears, in our eyes, in our heart and soul. So we are arpeggiating these chords, dominant 7 chords, minor 7 chords, and major 7 chords. So and you can definitely hear the sound of all those chords as they're going by. What goes up must come down. Now, even if that's your first steps to improvising, and you just embellish those sounds, you're still going to sound pretty good because you're making the changes. Cool. So now, after we've done bass line, we've done triads up and down, we've done sevenths up and down, now we have to start targeting those juicy notes, the guide tones, the thirds and sevenths. Those outline the chords, and they make the sound happen. So we're now going to target the thirds, so we're going to go from the root of each chord to the third of each chord. Some of them are major thirds, some of them are minor thirds. Now we got to target the sevenths. So now we're going to go from root to seventh. But instead of jumping all those sevenths, major and minor sevenths, we're going to put the sevenths below the root. It's a little easier to manage, especially for younger players. So now we're going to do roots and sevenths. Those are some funny sounds. Again, but so necessary. Now, we get to the fun stuff. Playing just the guide tones, just the thirds and sevenths. Thirds and sevenths of each chord, and then those moving to the thirds and sevenths of the next chord. And as you'll see and hear, in a weird sort of way, it makes a lot of sense. So here's the thirds and sevenths of each chord. And you can totally hear the movement of all those chords as they're going by. What goes up must come down. We just started that little pattern on the third. Now we're going to start on the seventh, so everything's reversed. Now, let's get out of that super tricky stuff and let's move to some simple patterns. Simple patterns like 1, 2, 3, 5 over chords, and then reverse it, 5, 3, 2, 1. So, first pattern, 1, 2, 3, 5. And again, you can hear through that, through the guide tones, through the arpeggiations of the seventh chords and the triads, you can hear all those chords moving. What goes up must come down. 5, 3, 2, 1 of each one of those chords. my recommendation is all along the way through all these steps, because it can be a little tricky, have some fun improvising in between. So now we're going to incorporate putting some 2-5-1 shapes or patterns over the chord changes. We're going to do 2 of them for you. First one's a very simple pattern, and it outlines the movement of the 7th going to the 3rd of a chord. So here it is. Here's a nice simple 2-5 pattern over the first 4 bars of Autumn Leaf. The E flat major 7 chord at the end, I'm merely taking the same shape, 3-2-1, that I took in the B flat major 7, just transposing it to E flat. So that's a nice simple shape, 2-5-1 shape. Now we're going to get a little more complicated, but not too much so, utilizing what we call the Dorian sound for the C minor, using the bebop scale for the F7, and then outlining the chord, B flat major 7, starting on the 3rd, and then transposing that, outlining the E flat major 7, starting on the 3rd as well. Same pattern, same shape. So over the C minor 7, that's our Dorian minor. Over the F dominant 7, that's an F dominant sound, F mixolydian sound, but we're using both major 7 and dominant 7, so we call it a bebop scale. And we resolve that to our B flat major 7. Just sounds great, right? Just outlining over the chord. We transpose that to E flat. Transposing it the same shape, 3, 5, 7, 9. Put it all together, see what we come up with. So we've got a simple 2-5, and then we've got a more complex 2-5, all being able to define it as you're playing it and work on it. So now, you've done all this homework on the tune, we've figured a lot of steps out. Now what we want to do is we want to record ourselves playing over this to make sure that we are outlining the sound. Again, using the term harmonic rhythm, making sure that we are playing 4 beats of C minor 7, 4 beats of F7, 4 beats of B flat major 7, and 4 beats of E flat major 7. All too often, sometimes we jump to a chord too early or a little too late. So you record yourself, you'll be able to hear that. Then, we want to make sure that we are hanging out with the piano. We want to play some of these sounds on the piano. I'll go through a couple of steps, just a different level, to make sure that I understand what I'm doing on piano, and anyone can play the piano. You just got to do it. So, piano's scary, right? Easiest thing to do is take those steps we just did on trombone and transfer them to piano with a lot of patience. So we have the roots of the chords, we find the roots, and we play them in time. And then same exact steps, we try to find the triads, we try to find the 7th chords. So here's what we call just playing 1, 3, 5, 7, root position, all the chords we're going to play. C minor 7, F dominant 7, B flat major 7, E flat major 7. You can hear all those sounds. So we try to do that with our roots. I'm going to put them up here just so there's a little bit of separation. Not the hippest thing in the world, but you got to start somewhere. You got to jump in, so don't be afraid of that. So then we did the guide tones. We did the 3rds and 7ths. I'm going to do the same thing, playing the 3rds of each chord. 1, 2, 3rds, and... You can hear all those sounds. Let's add the 7th to that. So roots in my left hand, 3rds and 7ths in my right hand. All root position, as we call it. 1, 2, 3, and... can hear the tune, you can hear the chords. So don't be afraid of that. Then we want to try to flip those guide tones the same way we played them, switching them up so they're leading to each other so our right hand isn't jumping around like a leapfrog. 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks pretty easy, right? Then we want to add some color to that, add some 9s, perhaps some 13s or 5s, depending on what chord you're working on. Keep all the voicings nice and close together. Get some crunches in there with some half steps and tritones. Now it's going to take a while, but oh man, is it worth it. All right, so we've gone through all these different steps. We've hung on the piano a little bit, and now we're going to try to put it together. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a little jazz etude. And the etude is going to be using some of those materials we used, as well as maybe embellishing them for a little creativity. And you should be able to hear all the different steps we did. So I'm going to go through those 4 bars. I'm just going to loop those 4 bars. And you're going to hear a whole bunch of stuff that we did and see if it makes sense to you. 1, 2, 1. And while I'm doing that, I'm recording myself so I can hear what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. Because I might end up playing something I've never played before that I'm like, whoa, what is that? And I want to have that documented so I can go back and be like, oh, that's what it was. So if you do all these different steps, you don't have to be a genius. You just have to be diligent, work hard at it, want it, be a little curious, and keep swinging. Steps to learning a tune. If you have any questions about anything having to do with trombone or jazz or even just life, feel free to give me a call or email me. Love to talk to you more about this and connect.